Amar Campanajjar is running to be the next congressman from California's 48th congressional district. The first Latino Arab American to run for Congress. He's also a United States naval officer. Now, the thing about Amar is he ran before and narrowly lost to Republican and Trump lackey Darrell Issa back in 2020. And he said, you know what, I'm not going to do this anymore in terms of politics. But then he heard the siren song of the fight to defend democracy. He understood the mission. He understood the assignment that we have to bring fresh, new perspectives and fighters to DC. And so he said, I'm putting my hat back into the ring. Take a listen to what he has to say, because he is leaning into his lived experiences to be able to bring a candidacy that I think that you'll appreciate. And I'm truly excited to be able to sit down now with a congressional candidate from California's 48th district, Amar Campanajjar. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. And thank you for perfectly pronouncing my name, by the way. Kudos to you.
Look, my last name has had some measures of bastardization that I would care not to repeat, but it's important, right? Because number one, it is who we are.
Right.
Oftentimes we are defined by and identified obviously by our names, but I think for you specifically, it's worth for us to start there, right? Because I want people to know your background. You have a very unusual cultural kind of cool mix of a background. And I think it lends itself for you to having a lived experience. It's going to make you a fantastic member of Congress.
Can I just take you on the road with me everywhere? That's a great intro. No, I often...
I kind of do this for a living sometimes, whatever. So.
No, thank you for that. And, I always say, who you are is measured by whose you are and what communities you belong to.
I like that.
So I'm a proud Mexican Palestinian American, the son of a single working class mom, first in my household to graduate college, and only in America. I grew up in Gaza for 4 years. I was born in La Mesa in San Diego, and I grew up in Gaza for 4 years during times of peace and war. So between 1997 and 2001. And for those who are history buffs, that was before and after the second uprising. And I've seen times of peace and war. And only in America can that story happen. Can the son of a woman from the barrio and a man from a war-torn part of the world be here on this podcast, as a United States naval officer running for Congress? And I know that name is an odd name, and people say, what kind of name is that? And it's an American name. It's an American story, an improbable journey, like many of us whose families came in from everywhere, like you could relate to. And only in America can that story be possible. But those stories are happening with less and less occurrence right now because of Trump, because of Darrell Issa, because of these tariffs and ICE raids and the unwelcoming, mean-spirited cruelty of this administration. That every day we're flooded with something new, and part of why I'm running is to restore that promise. That welcome my family. My dad, was an orphan when he was 11 years old. And at 18 years old, he chose to come to America, and America chose him, thank God, embraced him, welcomed him. And if it were not for that welcoming spirit, I wouldn't be here today. We wouldn't be having this conversation. So we need to restore, what is America at its base, and that's who we are.
I read when I was preparing for us to hang out today that, as you just said, you lived in Gaza as a young child, and then you came back to the United States with your mother and your brother.
Right.
And I read that you came back with the help of the State Department, which I think is important to kind of talk about, because that is truly a reflection of a time when our country knew that there was value in not only helping people that needed help,
right,
and needed a place to come, but also understood that our country is richer when we have that diversity, when we have somebody like you who has, a Latino background and also a Palestinian background. I mean, well, was I wrong about that? Not Palestinian, right?
You're right. Palestinian.
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like that in and of itself also is a reflection of a different time, and a time that it seems we should be getting back to.
Right. That's part of why I'm running for office, is to make us more inclusive of a country. Obviously, if there are bad actors who come to our country with malintention, we should not have them be here. But we shouldn't let one or two bad actors paint a broad policy that affects an entire community, right? That's not who we are. And, serving in the military now as a naval officer, I've learned that, America leads best not just by the example of its power, but the power of our example. And the way that we welcome those who are struggling around the world and empower them and bring them into our economy and way of life. The way that we project our values abroad, we serve as a beacon of hope. So, even when I was living in Gaza in the 90s, there was so much hope in the early 90s after the Oslo Accords in 1993. At the time, President Clinton, with the Oslo Accords and the Rose Garden with Yitzhak Rabin and Yasser Arafat, and there was so much hope in the Arab world. And obviously that's devolved ever since for many reasons. But, I remember when I was there was an airport that was just built. And it was going to open up Gaza to the rest of the world and the rest of the world to Gaza. And that airport no longer exists. But Bill Clinton was there and he cut the ribbon to open up, commerce and opportunity. And we just live in a different world. But I've seen it happen before. I've seen prosperity here at home and abroad. And, I think we need to focus less on the wars that we wage abroad and more on the challenges we have here at home. Right? The cost of living, the threat to our democracy, the constitutional crisis that we're living through every single day. I'm preaching to the choir here on that fact. But, it is jarring. And, we have weapons of mass distraction every single day from this administration, distracting us from the real threats to our democracy, to our economy, to our way of life. We see, President Trump attacking the wrong 1%, undocumented immigrants, trans kids, you name it, and not focusing on the top 1%. Right. And helping us, instead of helping us unrig the economy, he's doubling down and giving tax breaks for billionaires and raising costs and lowering wages. And we just saw a report that came out today that showed that consumer confidence is continuing to decline right as we approach Christmas. I mean, that's not the American dream. And, my opponent, Darrell Issa, has rubber stamped every single freaking unpopular policy from this administration. Every single one. The tariffs, the ICE raids, Venezuela, the big ugly bill, holding people's health care hostage, every single one of those things. And so we need to hold Darrell Issa accountable. He was the first congressman to ever endorse Donald Trump back in 2015.
Oof.
So this guy, birds of a feather.
Well, yeah, I mean, you just reminded us we've been dealing with Trump bullshit for more than a decade now and going. I want to kind of pull on that thread of you being a naval officer. I want to thank you, number one, for your service. I think that's incredibly important. But number two, I want to kind of develop this a little bit with you because, we see Pete Hegseth have this truly warrior ethos, but not in a good way, right? In a way that is just advancing and rewarding aggression. And frankly, I think in ways where we see extrajudicial killings and murders happening under the guise of military, kind of support and operations. And I'm curious your thoughts about your role then in Congress when we see the type of things happening with Putin in Ukraine, for example, where we see aggression happening at the peril of democracy internationally. I understand and I agree we should focus on the domestic issues that are here, but I do think it's equally as important to pay attention to and make sure we're fighting the right fights, I think, internationally as well.
Great question. So let me just preface with, these are my views. I'm not speaking as a naval officer or as a military person because
yes.
I have to respect the UCMJ and all that stuff. Obviously, they're coming after folks and don't want to paint myself as a target. I'm sure they're watching every little word I say, and I'm not going to make any contemptuous remarks of anybody in the chain of command. But having said that, as a civilian, in Congress, my job will be to conduct civilian oversight over our armed forces and how we deploy assets and personnel abroad. And, I think that, again, it's just really important that we are in the business of not perpetuating forever wars. And I feel like we are, under President Trump, we haven't been able to clamp down on conflicts abroad. They've only increased. And now there's different narratives on that. You ask somebody else on the right, they'll tell you something else. They'll say he ended 8 wars. And I think that the world's...
And counting.
Right. And I think the world's aflame. And I think that's just not, we know in the military we should be the last resource, right? Not the first. We should use other instruments of our national power, diplomatic, information, economic, and kinetic warfare should be the last option, not the first option. And so, I'd like to get us back to a place where we are using all of our levers to be able to reduce conflicts and tensions abroad, de-escalate things. And I think that requires consistent leadership, that when we tell global world leaders, whether it's Putin or Zelensky or anybody else, when we say something, we mean it. and that we're not going to change our minds, and that we're not going to provide consistent leadership. And I think that's part of why, America's kind of receded from the global stage as being an honest and trustworthy broker on a myriad of issues. It feels like our leadership wants quick, easy wins. They want the headline, not the painstaking, tiresome work of nation building, of statesmanship, of negotiation, of mediating, facilitating conflict resolution. And I just see, the desire for clickbait and quick headlines. And that might be a function of our times. But unfortunately, we don't have leaders who want to sit there and honestly, broker solutions and offer carrots and sticks and hold dictators like Putin accountable and say, hey, that's it. You are the country that is occupying another country. You are the power that's trying to remove the sovereignty of the Ukrainian people. And we don't do it in a consistent fashion, right? We pick winners and losers in a very arbitrary way around the world under this leadership. And I think we need to have leadership that's driven by our values and not just driven by financial interest, depending on who's willing, the highest bidder who's willing to line the pockets of our current leadership. That's how it feels like diplomacy is running these days.
Well, yeah, and having a recognition of the value of soft power as well. I think there's now kind of been some ignorance affiliated with that. For example, with the demonetization or the complete destruction of USAID, for example, right? There are ways to influence the global kind of stage and the geopolitics that help us as Americans, even domestically. But to your well-taken point, there really is no plan, but that's true, right? There's always concepts of a plan when it comes to this administration.
Although I will say his national address the other day didn't even have concepts of a plan. It was just like a weird.
I think the best comment I saw on social media, Amar, about that was, and by the way, let me be very clear, and I made it clear on social media at the time, I didn't watch it. I'm like, hard pass, I'm just over it. But I will say somebody said it was like a coked up squirrel reading a teleprompter on 2x speed. So again, that was somebody's incredible comment on social media.
That's so fun.
I have spent a lot of time speaking to candidates for office, national, federal, offices, whatever, which are clearly important. But I am a huge proponent here at my channel of using my space, my ability, my platforms to amplify people that are running for local and state offices, right? I think those are some of the most overlooked races where there's very real power that can be wielded that impacts us on a daily basis. Right. And part of the emphasis that I've been seeking when I've been speaking to people that are candidates for office are their lived experiences. I feel like voters these days, and they have been telling me explicitly, they want candidates that have had lived experiences that mirror theirs or just show an empathy for the regular everyday American who maybe never had political aspirations, but wants to be able to put food on the table, right? I mean, like understands how these are important. And I read that, you were raised by a single mom, which is commonplace and happens, and that you were already working as a janitor and a groundskeeper at a local church when you were 16 years old. And when I read those things, I feel like you don't have to have strife to build character, but I think that when you go through that and you understand the humility of working hard to get out of where your situation is, you've said, your zip code should not define your destiny. I mean, that for me strikes such a chord, right? I mean, I'm a child of immigrants too. And, I've been working for a long time. And I just kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit about your lived experience and how that translates to your role as a member of Congress.
That's a great question. I carry that with me every single day. One of my first jobs, as you said, was as a janitor and groundskeeper at my local church. And that really shaped me in ways that are profound, that are beyond just, working to help my mom make ends meet and provide for my brother at the time. It showed me grit, hard work. It showed me that I could do tough things because I was going to school as well. And it showed me the dignity of work. And it doesn't define you, it reveals who you are. And so when I'm going through tough times in my career as a naval officer or teaching at Georgetown or running for office and wearing multiple hats and I'm, tired because I'm doing a lot of things, I think back to that 16-year-old kid who was able to do all this hard work, go to school, get good grades, and also work full time and be a janitor and groundskeeper. And, and I look at, the people those are the people I look up to. People who work with their hands, hardworking people. And what bothers me about Trump and Darrell Issa is that he looks down at the people I've looked up to my whole life. working class people, Latinos, immigrants, Arab Americans who contribute to our economy and way of life sometimes have to go through multiple layers of obstacles just to get a fair shake, right? Just to get an opportunity. And they don't do it with any, chip on their shoulder. You see these people who are working out there in the fields, who are doing these, jobs with their hands, labor-intensive jobs. They take pride in their work, and they take pride in servicing others, but also providing for their families. And so I think about those people who don't have a voice. And that's part of why I'm running for office, is because I, for some reason now, have the privilege, which I never thought being Palestinian and Mexican, the word privilege would,
Africa, yeah.
But, the people of this district have given me a voice, and the fact that I've run multiple times and got close. And so when I look at what's happening in the world, in the country, I could bitch and complain, but I shouldn't do it from the sidelines. I should do it from the front lines, because I actually have the advantage of trying to make a difference. And I know you know what that feels like, to have that calling that I could maybe do something above and beyond what the average person can do because of this weird, set of circumstances that put me in this position to be able to serve in this way. So I think about that 16-year-old Amar, who was a groundskeeper, who was a janitor, whose dad wasn't around. I think about those young men who are struggling right now, with a crisis of despair and belonging and, meaning, and trying to find a way to, feel protected, respected, and connected. That's what all young people, especially young men right now, we're having a big crisis with them. And so when I'm running for office, I think about the plight of those folks and their moms, right? They're single moms who are raising these boys who are trying to figure out who they are. And I really empathize with that. And that's part of what inspired me to run for office in the first place, or even get into politics. It was President Barack Obama, this, skinny brown guy with a funny name, raised by a single mom, who grew up in different parts of the world. I heard his story and I was like, I could relate to that. And if he, after 9/11, we could elect a man named Barack Hussein Obama, then maybe this was a turning point for our country. And then that inspired me to run. And now we're seeing, I think, the pendulum swing in the other direction, unbelievably. And now I think there's a chance for us to get, people to show up and show us, who we are as Americans, despite these last 10 years of, backsliding from our values under Trump.
Well, look, you were really close in the general in 2020 when Darrell Issa ended up winning. Issa retired, man. I mean, he left politics in 2018, came back to run in the 48th. And like I said, won in the general, but like the skin of his teeth won, right? Like, this is not some big blowout, but you kind of had made the decision, Amar, that you were like, you know what, I'm going to kind of maybe take a break and a breather from politics. So why you? Why now? I guess is my question.
I think part of that is the willingness to walk away from it all. I joined the military, became a United States naval officer, teaching at Georgetown, very, proud to serve in those ways. I felt very comfortable, but this is not the time to be comfortable. This is a where were you moment. This is a constitutional crisis, and people are going to ask, where were you when people were fighting for their lives and their livelihoods and their health care and their constitutional rights? And I'm not going to just say, I was on the sidelines cheering on, whoever's trying to defend democracy. No, I stood in the breach. I squared my shoulder to this moment. I stepped up, I stepped in, and I did everything I could with no regrets and took on this fight. And, we got close to being Darrell Issa before, as you said. We got within single digits in a district that Trump won by 15 points. Somehow, this skinny brown guy with a funny name got people who voted against Biden and for Trump to vote for me. And it's because I didn't focus on my hues, I focused on my views. I was able to tell them, look, it's not about the left versus the right. It's the top versus the bottom. It's the outsiders versus the insiders. The biggest lie in politics is that we should be fighting each other when we should be, trying to level the score and reimagine the economy so it works for everybody. And that means taking on the 1%, taking on the monopolies and the corporate welfare and the tax loopholes and the stock buybacks and all the corruption, grift, and greed and tyranny that this administration not just enables, but embodies. People like Darrell Issa, who've been around for 20 years, selling their votes to the highest bidder, big pharma, big oil, big tech, the gun lobby. And I'm like, let's push this shit back forever. Let's introduce an amendment to overturn Citizens United, to get corporate money out of our politics, out of our lives, and out of the pockets of our elected officials. So I'm passionate, and I feel like this is a time for a new generation of leadership. And as Trump is attacking, Mexican Americans and Arab Americans, he's literally trying to deport half of me and ban the other half. I think we need people who could stand the breach, who could be an example to young people everywhere, to people of color everywhere, to Palestinian Americans and Mexican Americans who feel unseen and under attack by this administration, that they have someone who's fighting for them every single day. And working class people who grew up like me, who might say, you know what, that brown guy, he's talking a lot of sense. So what my main focus is talking to every single voter and meeting them where they are, which is the kitchen table, is how do we reduce the cost of healthcare and housing and groceries? How do we reduce costs, raise wages, and fight for working people, regardless of what their background is? And, that's been my focus. And we've been able to raise over $750,000 from 35,000 individual donors, no corporate PAC money at all, no foreign interest money, just people. And, we've been able to have a poll that shows that I'm beating Darrell Issa by 4 points right now in this district. So we're going to keep this winning formula for this campaign, which is driven by people, which is raising wages and raising hell, getting money out of politics, and trying to, focus and bring this seat back to the people. And if people want to learn more about my campaign, if I could plug my website.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you, where can they go learn more and give you some support?
Yeah, you can go to my website, Ammar, AMMAR, FOR, Congress.com. You can learn more about me and pitch in before the end of the year. If you're feeling generous, you can go ahead and do that.
Well, look, Ammar, I am truly excited. I am older than you, and just
Barely,
so thrilled.
barely.
Well, thank you for that. It's the good Asian genes. But I will say, I'm just thrilled when I see this type of energy that is, corroborated with and foundationally based on life experience and your service, your public service, your military service. I mean, it's a great combination. And, it's a good reminder too, Ammar, that people should not take elections for granted in certain states. For example, you're in California. This is California's 48th district. And a lot of people may be like, oh, it's California. It's blue. It's got, it's got Gavin Newsom. It's got, Rob Bonta as the AG. This is a very important conversation, Ammar, because people need to pay attention to these congressional races, even in blue states. They need to understand that districts are district by district. And that's why it's so important to understand what's at stake and who will really take you with them to DC to fight for them. And that is you. You're a fighter in every sense of the word. And so, Ammar Campa-Najjar, I am just thrilled to have been able to spend this time with you. I urge everybody to go and check out your website for your campaign. And I look forward to touching base with you very soon with updates and to see how things are going.
Thank you so much. This is one of those 5 districts that Gavin Newsom helped us redistrict in the fight against Texas. So you are so right to say that this is a national fight. This redistricting battle going on across the country. They brought this fight to California. We've redone 5 districts. This is one of those 5. So hopefully we flip these 5 seats, we take back the House, and we hold Donald Trump accountable. That's why this seat is so important. And so thank you for giving us a national platform to elevate this race and allowing us to really share what the stakes are across the country.
No, absolutely. And if I didn't say it yet, I'm saying it now. There is no daylight between Donald Trump and Darrell Issa. There never has been, and there won't be. And I think that is the critical issue for anybody who cares about making sure that affordability is a reality and not just a talking point in any of these races. And Ammar, I know you're the guy who's going to be able to deliver it. So you know what? Give him hell. Give him hell, my friend. I'm grateful for you. Happy holidays. It was good to see you.
Likewise.
Katie Phang here. We launched the Katie Phang News Channel in partnership with the Midas Touch Network so we could bring you the latest in legal and political news. Straight, no chaser. So if you're a fellow truth teller, hit that subscribe button and share the word about this channel so we can build a high information America together.
I can tell you, our constituents are enraged too. They're enraged by what this government is doing in our name. They are enraged on your behalf. They hate what they're seeing on their TV screens and their phone screens, and they want us to be here witnessing and spreading the alarm, and that's why we're here. And I want to be really clear, and some of us were talking about this yesterday, this is all about abuse of power.
As you just heard Congresswoman Becca Balint from Vermont say, it's the egregious abuse of power. And that's really what it is. It's an abuse of power, power that could be legitimately used for good, but instead being weaponized for evil. I had the chance to reunite with Congresswoman Balint, one of my favorite people. And part of it is because she's actually out there doing the work. She's meeting with people, not even people that are constituents in Vermont. She's making sure that the work is being done even when we are on day 27 of a government shutdown. I did ask her, though, a question that I am now demanding of all congressional candidates as well as members of Congress. I want to know, will you pledge to, at a minimum, have accountability hearings when the Democrats take the majority back in November of 2026? Accountability for all of these abuses of power? Because the answer is unequivocally, and it only has to be yes. If you're not willing to take that step, then you, me, we've got a problem, but not with Becca Balint. Take a listen. Joining me now is one of my absolute favorite people, Congresswoman Becca Balint from the amazing state of Vermont. She was just saying there may be a few leaves. I'd never made it for my leaf a peeping or peeping a leafin or whatever the phrase is. So hopefully I'll get a chance to do it next year. But I am grateful for you to take the time to join us because you were on the road just a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
You were at a shadow hearing in Chicago. And when I saw you and other members of Congress, as well as state representatives from the state of Illinois together, it not only made me feel so relieved that y'all are working because we know the GOP is not right now during the shutdown, but talk about who went and why y'all did the shadow hearing in Chicago on Friday.
Yeah. So in the end, it ended up being a kind of extraordinary cross-section of our caucus. 19 members of Congress came to the shadow hearing. So from all over the country, from Texas, from California, from Vermont, certainly there were a number of people there from Illinois and Chicago. Mary Gay Scanlon was there from Philadelphia. And so we know that Chicago right now is in ground zero right now for ICE. And it was important for us to show the people of Chicago that we are thinking about them. We are holding them in our hearts. We are trying everything that we can to hold this administration accountable. And it was also important for people like Delia Ramirez and Chuy Garcia, who represent districts in Chicago, to see us there standing with them. And, what we heard we did a formal hearing, but we also had conversations without cameras rolling with family members who had loved ones hauled off by ICE, detained, put in the system, not being able to have access to them, talk about the conditions at the Broadview ICE detention center, talk to the pastors who have been there praying and have been brutalized. And so it was a very raw visit. And I also left with a lot of hope because these people are being so strong in standing up for their community. And on the ground, these communities, these neighborhoods have organized themselves in rapid response teams to make sure that these families are not feeling alone, to make sure that people's rights are not violated. And what we see is a fair amount of lawlessness going on right now with ICE. And one of the messages that came through loud and clear for us is we need you to tell the world that ICE is lying, that this administration is lying, that they are not going after criminals, that they are not going after people who have either been accused or convicted of violent crimes. They're going after the tamale, seller on the corner.
That's right.
The grandmother who's been selling tamales for 20 years on that street corner. They're going after people when they drop their kids off for school, when they show up for work. We heard one horrible story of a man, undocumented, has been living in his community for decades. The people next door asked him if he's very good with his gardening skills. They asked him if he would come over and help them replant a tree on their lawn. While he was doing that, helping out, being a good neighbor, ICE swooped down and treated him with so much bluster and violence as if he were someone to be feared. And this is the piece. They said, we need you to know that ICE is lying about who they're going after. We knew this, right? But to hear it directly from these people who are at ground zero. The other thing they said is, we can't believe how our government in the United States, I was hearing this from the children of parents who had been detained. They said, I can't believe how my mother is being treated without any dignity or respect. They talked about the humane conditions in Broadview, where people are packed in like sausages. They don't have beds to sleep on. They don't have good access to food or medical care. And they said, we can't believe this is happening in the United States of America, that we fled here for a better life. We can't believe that this is happening. And so they said over and over, we're so important. It's so important to us that you're here to bear witness, but we need you to tell these stories.
And it doesn't escape my note that this is a state with a strong governor.
Yes.
It's a city with a strong mayor. I mean, there is a baked in kind of support system that is fighting alongside them. So how do you take all of this amazing emotion and knowledge and insight, and how you convert that in a way that's productive in places that don't have a strong governor, a strong mayor, and they need to know this, because sometimes we echo chamber the heck out of ourselves.
Yes.
Because we have morals and because we're thoughtful people as Democrats. But how do we kind of get this pushed out so that the horror, unfortunately, it needs to touch on other people in their lives in some way?
It does. And that is the kind of question that haunts me, frankly, day and night, which is how do I use the platform that I have to get out the word in a way that will land with people, right? So I always say, I want to speak to be understood. I want to listen to understand. And so it doesn't do us any good to constantly be sharing information within an echo chamber alone, right? Like, certainly it's important for us to get strength from each other, but the real test of the message is, can you get people who at their core think of themselves as decent human beings, as kind Americans, to understand that the way in which our government is being weaponized against human beings is out of line with our values, whether you identify as a Democrat, an independent, a Republican, or someone who never votes, right? And so it is about using language that brings people in. And so they talked about like really talking to constituents across the political spectrum. Would you want your mother to be treated like this?
Yeah.
Your mother, who maybe she has a little business on the side. One day she shows up for work and people treat her as if she's a terrorist. Like, would you want that for your mother? Is this making us safer, right? That's the other thing, because as Americans, we want to feel safe and secure with our kids, our grandkids, our neighborhoods. But it's tough because one of the witnesses at the formal hearing, he was an attorney, and he said, I know in this moment, a lot of people are scared that the courts are not going to be there for us, right? That we've got two legs of the stool that aren't working right now. You've got the executive branch that is overreaching, constantly breaking the law. We can talk about all of those violations. You have a Congress that in Republican hands has given up all of their authority. So then the last leg of the stool is the courts. And this lawyer said, the courts right now in this moment are what are separating us from the bounds of complete brutality. And
it's true.
Right. And one of the things that he said was, I know that it feels completely overwhelming in this moment, and we don't have a lot of trust in the Supreme Court. But he said, I want us to look at all of the lower courts. How many judges, regardless of who appointed them, are saying, no, you may not do this, whether it is about funding, whether it is about the way that Border Patrol or ICE is operating. And so I do feel like, for me, the challenge in this moment is that this administration, J.D. Vance and the president, from the top on down, they have decided that compassion and humanity are weakness. They have decided that caring about your fellow man is a sign of not just weakness, but of some kind of moral depravity, where they are embodying this kind of moral depravity in even if you just look at that AI video that the president put out of him literally dropping feces on American people. Like, they're telling us in every possible way that they're not interested in treating Americans with dignity and respect. And obviously that should scare the hell out of all of us, but we can't stay just in our fear or we'll be paralyzed. And so, I'm curious, honestly, for you, when you think about in this moment, like, what is that message that is going to get us closer to bringing us back to our own humanity and not having people manipulate that as some kind of weakness?
Well, part of me, loves to operate in the land of the law because that's what my training has been. And I will footnote to the point that the lawyer was taking. There's a federal judge named Sarah Ellis who is hearing a very important case in Chicago right now that was brought by journalist Pastor Black, who is somebody that you had the pleasure of speaking with or privilege, and other protesters that have been brutally harmed by the illegal and unconstitutional tactics of these federal agents. And Judge Ellis is hauling Gregory Bovino, who's the head of CBP, into court this week to have to account for using tear gas canisters in violation of her court order. That's the type of stuff that we are seeing in terms of respecting the rule of law. But I kind of wanted to explore something a little bit more with you because the title of this shadow hearing was Kidnapped and Disappeared, Trump's Assault on Chicago. And part of the reason why I am trying to tell people that their vote matters so much, especially next year, is I want a commitment from the Democrats, especially those that are running for office, that there will be accountability hearings. Because to your well-taken point, sometimes people need to see the evidence of it themselves. Yeah. They need to see very public hearings where people that have done wrong are held to account in some way. Yes. And in order to do that, Democrats have to be back in the position of power, controlling those levers, because I feel like that's when we know that there are deterrents that exist that would hopefully tell people we can't continue to live in an America like this.
That's exactly right. And that was another message that came through loud and clear, both from the witnesses that we heard from and those of us who were there for the hearings. We would talk before and after these different meetings that we had, that it does come down to accountability. That if in the end we do get the gavel back, we do get the majority in the midterms, it is absolutely critical that whether it's an oversight or judiciary or basically any single committee that has seen the executive branch violating its authority, when you see individuals like Kristi Noem, when you see Gregory Bonvino and others absolutely abusing power. That's it. That's the crux of it, Katie, is that so much of what we are experiencing right now is rampant abuse of power. And we need to be not just calling it out, but we have to be clear that we must hold them accountable for this when we actually have some more power. And, it is a message that I hear over and over from voters, which is, what are you all going to do when you have it back? And
that's what I want. I want the pledge. I want to know that there's going to be actual teeth to this, because I think the pearl clutching and the hand wringing only gets you so far. Exactly. And then we kind of, again, I think the deterrent element of this is so powerful so that we don't have a repeat of this, which dovetails with the whole whitewashing of history that happens with this administration. Yeah. And you talk about the lying, we talk about the accountability, and then I see things like a $300 million price tag for that just atrocity, right, of a ballroom. You and I are having a conversation on day 27 of a government shutdown. I predicted before it happened that this will exceed the longest shutdown we've had, sadly. Food lines are getting longer. SNAP benefits are now being extortedly kept from Americans effective November 1st. $172 million for Kristi Noem's 2 private jets. $40 billion to Argentina. Javier Milei just winning, by the way, thereby securing the $40 billion while American farmers suffer. I mean, Becca, this is just... maybe this is what people need to feel to be able to understand that this is an unsustainable way for America to go.
Absolutely. And the destruction of the East Wing, I think, has touched so many Americans who have never been to the White House. But
even Republicans, though? You think Republicans care too?
Katie, if only I knew what they cared about other than power. And I mean that so sincerely. Like, I'm not trying to be snarky. I'm really not. Like, I know. Okay, so I'm going to take a little detour. I know that some of these Republicans ran for the same reasons I did. They have a housing crisis in their district. They have an opioid crisis. They care about their farmers. They got, flooding that they need to deal with. And somewhere along the line, they have lost their voice, right? I thought it was so interesting what Rand Paul said this weekend. Did you see this?
Yes,
he said,
it was powerful. We're always grateful for the sanity when it comes to the GOP.
Right? When Rand Paul said, oh, I'm the one they all put forward to actually be brave and say the thing. They're a bunch of,
Yes, I know what you want to say.
You know what I want to say, right?
Yes.
And so this is the thing. What is it that is going to shake them from their cowardice? I don't know, but maybe it's going to be breadlines. Maybe it's going to be that people show up at their offices and say, oh, is this a let them eat cake moment? You are literally starving people. You're taking away their health care. You're terrorizing them in their neighborhoods, all while you are allowing this president to build this monstrosity of a ballroom that is an homage to himself.
Yeah,
that's what it is, right? Just like his stupid ark that he wants to build, right? It is all about abuse of power. And I would have thought at this point, they would have been already shaken to their cores. I am stunned that they will tell us behind closed doors. They will wring their hands like, well, what can we do? What can we do? We're just waiting.
How about not screw Americans on healthcare? That's a start.
How about you get a group of you as a voting bloc and tell Speaker Johnson, get back to work. I mean, this is the thing. It is the bootlicking, the incessant bootlicking that I know our founders never imagined, right? To my point about the two legs of the stool that aren't working right now. The framers never imagined there would be a Congress that would willingly give over its rights, its authority, its power to the executive. Article 1, baby. Article 1 is Congress. It's not the executive.
And that's part of the reason why. And again, I always couch this with the caveat that I am sitting in the privilege of not being a federal worker right now, nor do I rely upon SNAP benefits. But, that was the reason why I said, why would you not actually go into a shutdown if you're a Democrat? Because you're pretty much you're going to be funding your irrelevance by voting it along. But you have an interesting state though, Becca, because you've got a lot of red voters. You have a lot of Republicans in your state, especially in the more rural sections of Vermont. What are you hearing from them? Because I know there's some talks about, maybe a continuing a resolution, which in my opinion is just kicking the can down the road. We're just going to have this battle once again. What are we going to have another shutdown in a few months? But what are you hearing from your constituents, especially your Republican constituents, about this shutdown?
They want us to sign on to any continuing resolution that Republicans offer. They have bifurcated their brains, and that's just the human condition, right? That the top news for me in the last few days was that Trump did not authorize emergency relief funds for Democratic districts, Vermont being one of them. Okay, we had horrible flooding. And most of those areas that were the hardest hit, they are Republican areas, rural areas. They are small towns that can't possibly shoulder the burden of this financial hit to them to rebuild. And they are also the ones that will lose their Medicaid. Many people in rural areas, because that we know health outcomes are worse in rural areas. They just are that, it's difficult to make ends meet, and so they are the ones who are going to be most immediately directly impacted, but they do not see it as something they are able to connect the dots over right now because it's too painful. Who wants to admit they made a mistake?
And that's the human nature part of it, right? It's like, You don't even want to admit a mistake. I hate admitting that I'm wrong. Anybody, right? And to your point, it's like, and then you did something that impacts millions and millions of Americans. It's like one thing if I made a mistake in my home. It's like a whole other thing if I made a mistake that impacts millions and millions of Americans. But I will say though, and I hate to say this because this is where my humanity kind of struggles, and I've shared this publicly with a lot of people. This is the find out part. I'm sorry to say this, but sometimes I feel like that's the critical mass point that people have to get as Republicans before they realize that this cannot be a replicated moment. But at the same but in the same token, though, we as Democrats have to put up candidates, though, that are palatable, that are going to be able to resonate enough with the people where we can seize on the opportunity of this being provided to us, because that's the only way we're going to convert them into people that are going to vote for Dems in 2026. And
and it's critically important that we do a better job of saying to people, I know you feel like you're getting screwed over, and actually you are. You're just blaming the wrong people. Like, you have a right to be enraged and feel like the economy isn't working for you. You have a right to be frustrated that you work and you can't get ahead, and you don't think your kid is going to ever be able to buy a house in Vermont, and like all of these things, and say that is valid. And this economy is not working for most people, right? And also, you're blaming the wrong people. Trans people are not responsible for that. People who are coming to work here and be roofers here in Vermont, or be, working on our dairy farms, they're not responsible for your pain, right? They're not responsible for the climate change that is changing the growing season. And it's really important to say to them, you don't need to become a Democrat to vote Democratic.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Right? This is because it's an identity thing. Some people, right, they have been Republicans for generations. And I think this is where we have to change the way that we are inviting people in. It's true for people who are disaffected voters and independents. They're like, well, I just don't imagine myself as a Democrat. That has baggage for me. I don't need you to become a Democrat. I need you to vote in a way that is going to help you take care of your family, your community, and you're, and to give you a fair shot. And if that means that you're still going to retain your identity as Republican or independent, or someone who, hates politics. I hear that all the time. I hate politics. I'm like, I get that you hate politics, but politics impacts you whether you engage or not. So let's figure this out. But it's kind of like a marriage. I've been thinking about this, and stay with me for a minute here. Sure. So there's a psychology professor at Amherst College that I got to know. I reached out to her just because she wrote a book that I was very moved by. And she said, we forget that political identity is more akin to a marriage or to religion. And to ask people to completely throw over their conception of who they are is a very difficult ask, as opposed to, I'm just asking you in this election, here are your choices. Who's a better choice? Don't think of it as a Democrat or Republican. Think of it as who's going to show up for you, right? And I know that may be antithetical to what other people in my party are saying, but I want to win, Katie. I want to win. I want to flip the house. I want those gavels. And I don't want to keep saying, well, we're not going to reach out to those people. And we're going to just we're going to make ourselves irrelevant if we don't say to people, you don't have to become a totally different person in how you think about yourself. But I do need you to kind of look at the facts of here's this administration who literally just said Vermont will not get flood relief because they did not vote. Vermonters en masse did not vote for him, right?
Yeah, he's weaponized infrastructure, he's weaponized dollars, and he doesn't care who gets hurt. I mean, listen, you just spoke about the curse of identity politics, but I've also told people very openly too and transparently, I'm incredibly Machiavellian about this now. I think there's a lot of nuance that can be achieved, but only when you're in the positions of power to do it. And if you're not, then it's just us sitting there, waxing not so eloquently about a future that may never happen.
Yes.
So I think in some way, you've just urged all of us to practice mindfulness and being present. Let's just focus on what's right in front of us.
Yeah.
And let's not worry about stuff that's coming years down the pipeline, because we may never get there.
That's right.
At this rate. Congresswoman Becca Balint, it's always a pleasure to spend time with you. Thank you for working, because the Republicans are not. And thank you for kind of taking your empathy on the road, as you did with this shadow hearing. These are the types of things that Americans need to see our politicians doing. Republicans are certainly not doing this right now. They are certainly not listening to their constituents. But I'm grateful to you and the others that decided to do this, especially in Chicago.
Thank you. And can I leave you with one thing?
Always.
So I have been, it's interesting that you are talking about the compassion practice. I have been meditating more, because this is so hard. It's so hard to do this job. And I have never, I always say I have a squirrel brain. I'm always going, I'm always thinking, but I've been making myself sit. And this is what I have been saying to myself, and I have found a lot of comfort in it. May I be open to love. May I be open to awe. May I act with courage. May I act with kindness, and may I live a life of consequence. And just saying that over and over again in the morning before I start my day puts me in a better frame of mind for this work.
Well, thank you for sharing that. It's incredibly powerful. And to your point, you're doing it at the beginning of every day. You're not doing it at the beginning of the month. You're not doing it at the beginning of the year. You're doing it every day. And I think maybe that's the recentering that perhaps we as Americans need to do, because I think we're gaming it out too far. I mean, it's okay to have goals. It's okay to kind of play long ball, but I do think in the immediate sense, we're losing the plot.
We're losing the plot.
Been done lost. So, but thanks again, Congresswoman Balint. It's so good to see you.
My pleasure.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Katie Phang here. We launched the Katie Phang News Channel in partnership with the Midas Touch Network, so we could bring you the latest in legal and political news. Straight, no chaser. So if you're a fellow truth teller, hit that subscribe button and share the word about this channel so we can build a high information America together. So as we know, a subpoena was served by House Oversight on the estate of Jeffrey Epstein. And I mean, I got to be honest with you. This is not typical to have it be coming in on such a massively long rolling basis, as we've seen now with the Department of Justice's own response to the congressional subpoena that it got for the entirety of the Epstein files. But the estate of Jeffrey Epstein has now turned over some portion of the documents that are responsive to that subpoena that was served on it. And the thing that everybody is focusing on is this birthday letter from Donald Trump that was sent to Jeffrey Epstein to celebrate his 50th birthday back in 2003. And look, it has value, but not for the reason that perhaps you think that it does. I haven't seen the other things that I was interested in seeing, though, from that subpoena to the Epstein estate, like the non-disclosure agreements, the financial records. How about the surveillance, photos, etc., that could speak to the people that participated in those horrific acts of child sex predation and child sex trafficking, other than Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein? And the Republicans, and including Trump, they're trying to make you take the bait. The big debate now is what? Whether or not that's Donald Trump's signature or not. Do not be fooled by the Republicans and Donald Trump's efforts to try to, snow you or pull the wool over your eyes about whether or not that's his signature. It's his signature. And you don't even need to get into a compare and contrast analysis to know that it's his signature. It's his signature. So let's dispense with some of the bullshit just straight out of the gate so that we can move on to the meat of why this ends up being critically important and not for the reasons that you think so. So number one, we know that this birthday letter now exists. So contrary to what Trump, KKK, Caroline Leavitt, and others have been screaming about, claiming that that letter didn't exist. Oh yeah, and that includes couchfucker J.D. Vance. The letter exists. It's been turned over to the House Oversight Committee. So we'll get to the lawsuit, the defamation lawsuit that was brought by Trump against the Wall Street Journal and others in the Southern District of Florida in a second. But here we go, straight out of the gate, the letter exists. So now, what's the excuse that's being offered up by Trump, Vance, and others? Okay, so now the excuse is it's not his signature. Again, we can move on for that. But let's talk about why the reality militates towards why this is a Trump letter to Jeffrey Epstein. One, this was compiled in 2003. what is fake and hoax about any of this? Ghislaine Maxwell asked for these letters to be submitted by family, friends, girlfriends, etc. of Jeffrey Epstein. And if you look at the birthday book, which House Oversight has put up in some small redactions on a Google Drive for you to look at, there is a certain theme that goes throughout this birthday book submissions from Epstein, specifically from his friends. Lewd, body, crude, very sexually explicit. And there's a few things that are included in this that I think are really important. One is the Trump letter to Jeffrey Epstein. It fits thematically with what other people were submitting in support of Epstein's birthday. It also fit what everybody knew about Jeffrey Epstein, that he was lewd, crude, sexually suggestive, sexually explicit. That was his jam. That's how he rolled. And so his friends, of course, were like-minded. And listen, I'm not going to spare the rod for anybody. Bill Clinton's name is included in that list of people, right? As is Alan Dershowitz. As is also this guy, Joel Pashkow, and we'll get to that in a second. But Donald Trump was a friend. He's photographed with Epstein at Mar-a-Lago. He's flown several times to Epstein's island. He's been on Epstein's private jet. This is not a secret. So, of course, this is Donald Trump's letter saying happy birthday to his buddy. And of course, it's done in a way that's also sexually suggestive, with his signature being like pubic hair on this woman's body. But I want to focus on this guy, Joel Pashkow, for a second. If you turn to page 155 of the 238 pages that is provided by House Oversight, I really want to focus on this. Are you ready? Let's go. So page 155, and I apologize in advance because it is kind of a sexually suggestive, explicit drawing. This was done by Joel Pashkow, Pashcow, and I want you to look at it now on your screen while we're walking through it. It's pretty obvious that Epstein in 1983 is giving balloons and candy to little girls, disgusting as it were, and in 2003, half-naked young girls, women, looks like Mar-a-Lago to me, frankly. Epstein is getting, I don't know, is he getting a hand job, a blow job? I have no idea. He's getting a massage. I have no idea what is happening here, but it's obviously, again, fitting thematically with what Jeffrey Epstein was and what we knew about Jeffrey Epstein, and frankly, what all of his friends knew about what he was. Now, let's move on to the picture that was also submitted by Joel Pashkow, and that's on page 156. Okay, so that is a picture of Joel Pashkow and Jeffrey Epstein, a kind of redacted face of a woman and a man that we see in the back. And it says here, Jeffrey, as in Jeffrey Epstein, showing early talents with money and women, sells fully depreciated, and then the redaction is this woman's name, to Donald Trump for $22,500. Showed early people skills too. Even though I handled the deal, I didn't get any of the money on the girl. Really? So Donald Trump wasn't a part of that circle. He wasn't one of the friends. He would not have submitted a birthday submission or message or a card to Jeffrey Epstein back in 2003. And look, don't also take this bait, because this bait is some of the dumbest shit that Burchett has actually had to say. Burchett, whatever. Take a listen.
I mean, anybody can do a signature. We've seen the auto pen's been used quite a bit with the Biden administration. So I've never known Trump to be much of an artist either, so I kind of draw that into question.
Come on, auto pen. The level of conspiracy theory that has to be going on in the mind of the small little pea brain of this man is insane to me. There was auto pen back in 2003 that was being used to frame Donald Trump. I mean, I want you to think about it. Somebody knew that back in 2003 that they had to frame Donald Trump in 2025, and they had to do it in order to support his lawsuit for defamation against the Wall Street Journal. So in order to do that, they had to use an auto pen to forge Donald Trump's signature on a birthday card message that is equally as sexually explicit and suggestive as other submissions were in this birthday book that Ghislaine Maxwell, the co-conspirator, groomer, participator, abuser, and bestie of Jeffrey Epstein, was compiling in support of and for her best friend. Okay? And Burchett, whatever, he doesn't really know whether or not Donald Trump is known to be much of a drawer. We've now disposed of that as well. We know that the man doodled like other people doodle. His doodles, as in Trump's doodles, his little sketches and drawings have been sold at auctions. Donald Trump has admitted, yeah, you know what? I do. I have doodled. I have sketched. I mean, again, it's not the point. The point is what? The point is that we need the entirety of the Epstein files, because in the absence of them being turned over, how are people able to make the decisions on their own as to people's level of culpability and involvement? The card is fine. The card is whatever. The card is just a red herring for the bigger issue, which is turn over the damn Epstein files. One last thing that I wanted to get into when it came to the House oversight submissions is on page 171. So let's go to that together so we can look at it. Stand by. Here we go. Page 171. I mean, frankly, y'all can go look through this whole thing yourself and you see that it is 100% consistent with something like this Donald Trump thing. January 20th, 2003. Dear Jeffrey, I wanted to get you what you want, so here it is. Happy birthday, your friend Leslie. Now that is Les Wexner, co-founder of Bath and Body Works and The Limited, etc. He is, after that, he kind of subsequently, in like the, 2019 or something, he disavowed and didn't want to have anything to do with Jeffrey Epstein, but whatever. But look at this picture on 171. What is that? It's women's breasts. It's a sketch of women's breasts. Was there an auto pen used for Les Wexner back then? The cajillionaire who was jetting around and hanging around with Jeffrey Epstein? I mean, come on, people. It is so stupid to be caught up in this. It's not the important thing, but where does it have value? It has value when it comes to this. This is the lawsuit that Donald Trump brought against the Wall Street Journal over this birthday letter with Trump's signature on it. And it was brought July 18th, and we've talked about it here at the channel, but I just wanted to bring up a few things to you. One, what is the basis of the lawsuit? The basis is defamation in 2 counts, but here we go. Here we go. In the lawsuit on page 2, Trump alleges that the Wall Street Journal falsely claimed that Trump authored, drew, and signed a card to wish the late and utterly disgraced Jeffrey Epstein a happy 50th birthday. The defendants failed to attach the letter, failed to attach the alleged drawing, failed to show proof that President Trump authored or signed any such letter, and failed to explain how this purported letter was obtained. Here we go. Alex Brito, lawyer for Donald Trump. We've all now obtained that letter, haven't we? Haven't we? You wanted to play chicken with the Wall Street Journal? Well, they've called their bluff. The reason for those failures is because no authentic letter or drawing exists. Defendants concocted this story to malign President Trump's character and integrity and deceptively portray him in a false light. You have to laugh. Trump's character and integrity. Let's not get caught up in that, because that doesn't exist. No authentic letter or drawing exists. No drawing or letter exists, or no authentic letter and drawing exists, because I'm going to tell you right now, it's there. And it was turned over to House oversight by the estate of Epstein. The estate of Epstein, as in it was in the birthday book from 2003, from 22 freaking years ago. It was in the custody and control of the executors of the estate of Jeffrey Epstein. Let's fast forward again. The allegations is that page 7, paragraph 22. Tellingly, the Wall Street Journal article doesn't explain whether defendants have obtained a copy of the letter, have seen it, have had it described to them, or any other circumstances that would otherwise lend credibility to the article. That's because the supposed letter is a fake, and the defendants knew it when they chose to deliberately defame President Trump. It's not fake. It's not fake. I told you, it's 2 counts of defamation. Here's the laughable part. All of the articles, posts, and false statements concerning this birthday letter have resulted in overwhelming financial and reputational damages to President Trump, expected to be in the billions of dollars due to the direct and implicit defamatory statements paraded throughout the article. What are the damages sought in this lawsuit? No less than $10 billion for the reputational damages and harm to Donald Trump. I mean, look, this birthday letter is the crux of this defamation lawsuit. This defamation lawsuit is proceeding right now. And as we know, there was a little gamesmanship that happened between the plaintiff's lawyers representing the Trump, this Brito guy, and the lawyers for the Wall Street Journal about whether or not Murdoch was going to get deposed and Trump was going to get deposed. I mean, look, discovery is going to happen in this lawsuit. It's going to come out one way or another. And we've seen how badly convicted felon Trump does when he is deposed. I mean, do I need to remind him about how Robbie Kaplan, the lawyer for E. Jean Carroll, skewered his ass on a videotaped deposition under oath when E. Jean Carroll sued him for defamation and for sexual abuse? Donald Trump couldn't even ID his ex-wife, right? He thought that a picture of E. Jean Carroll was a picture of his ex-wife. I mean, putting aside the fact that that guy is dementia and brain-addled, senile, whatever, Trump does horribly in videotaped depositions and in depositions. Well, he doesn't tell the truth no matter what, but listen, this lawsuit and the letter, that's where it has evidentiary value. It doesn't speak to anything that comes to the Epstein files. Let's keep our focus, people. Focus on the Epstein files. The subpoena was important to the estate of Jeffrey Epstein. I've talked about it at length here. I still want the balance of what is due and owing from the Epstein estate. I don't understand why it hasn't been turned over. It was due September 8th. It's September 9th. This rolling production is bullshit. Just like that rolling production from the Department of Justice is bullshit from Pam Bondi when it comes to the entirety of the Epstein files. I understand that this is interesting. I understand that this drawing and the sketch and all this other stuff is interesting. I get it. We cannot lose our focus. We owe it to the victims and the survivors of Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and others to stay focused. We want the entirety of the Epstein files. And that is why we have to continue to speak up and speak out about not having our hands on it. The Department of Justice is being directed by way of a subpoena that is mandatory from Congress to turn the stuff over. It's Donald Trump who's not turning it over. It's not Pamela Jo Bondi. That's the other thing. Don't let that be a distraction either. It's not some judge somewhere. It's not some random lawyer somewhere. It's Donald Trump standing in the way of those Epstein files being turned over. So you can imagine what more could be contained within those Epstein files if this is just the tip of the iceberg of the things that we see having to do with Jeffrey Epstein. Stay mad, stay outraged, demand accountability, because we're going to stay on this always. Katie Phang here. We launched the Katie Phang News Channel in partnership with the Midas Touch Network so we could bring you the latest in legal and political news. Straight, no chaser. So if you're a fellow truth teller, hit that subscribe button and share the word about this channel so we can build a high information America together.